Welcome to Bookbound Audio. I'm Miguel Vasquez, your guide through the labyrinth of haunted histories and mysterious narratives. Today, I invite you to immerse yourself in a chilling tale set against the vibrant yet ruthless art scene of 1960s Los Angeles, The Curse of the Painted Veil. Prepare to journey into a world where eerie secrets, forbidden rituals, and shifting brushstrokes of dark destiny intertwine. Sit back, relax, and let your imagination wander as you listen to this twisted mystery unfold in rich, atmospheric detail. Enjoy the story, and thank you for joining us on this unique exploration of art, myth, and the supernatural. I arrived at the gallery on a humid Los Angeles evening, the warm, almost suffocating air punctuated by the distant hum of traffic and the occasional siren echoing off the sun-baked streets. The building, an imposing converted warehouse with soaring ceilings and exposed brick walls, seemed to pulse with energy under the glow of neon lights. This was the domain of art and ambition in the 1960s, a scene where avant-garde creativity met a ruthless appetite for beauty and notoriety. I, Miguel Vasquez, a history teacher with an unquenchable passion for myths and the occult, had been invited to this exclusive opening not only for my scholarly interest but also because of my long-standing friendship with Elliot Brooks, a detective whose uncanny ability to unravel mysteries had become legendary. As I stepped through the heavy glass doors, I was hit by a fusion of scents, delicate perfume, aged wood, and a faint trace of turpentine, a reminder that every masterpiece carried with it a blend of beauty and decay. The lobby was filled with art aficionados, collectors, and eager socialites murmuring in subdued tones while the soft strains of jazz played in the background. I moved through the crowd with measured steps, my eyes already scanning for subtle details that might later prove significant. In these moments, surrounded by genteel chatter and the refined ambience of curated modernity, my mind whispered that there was more lurking in the shadows of this orchestrated perfection than met the eye. I soon found Elliot near a grand reception table, his presence unmistakable even amid the glittering throng. His steely eye scanned the room with a vigilance that made him seem as much a part of the investigation as a guardian of hidden truths. Elliot's features were set in their habitual calm, his posture relaxed but his gaze sharp, a silent testament to the cases he had solved and the dark underbelly of human nature he had witnessed. When our eyes met, a brief nod passed between us, a wordless exchange of readiness and concern. I could already sense that tonight's events would be anything but ordinary. Our conversation was cut short by an announcement from the curator, a slender man with an impassioned air who moved gracefully to the center of the room. With a reverence that suggested this moment had been built on years of careful planning, he unveiled the centerpiece of the evening, a painting known only as the Painted Veil Star. Draped in a dark, velvet cloth, the painting hid its secrets until the final moments of the event. The crowd's murmur hushed to an expectant silence as the cloth was pulled aside slowly, revealing an artwork that seemed to oscillate between beauty and nightmare. At first glance, the Painted Veil mesmerized all who beheld it. The canvas was dominated by a palette of deep crimson and shadowy blacks, interspersed with streaks of muted gold that caught the dim light and refracted it in mysterious ways. The imagery was abstract yet disturbingly familiar, a twisting array of figures, symbols, and an almost imperceptible map of a ritual, as though layered with hidden meanings only visible to those who dared look deeply enough. I felt an inexplicable shiver traverse my spine as I looked upon it. There was something alive in the composition, an uncanny presence that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. For a brief moment, I thought I saw the shapes within the painting shift imperceptibly, as if the images were not merely painted but were dancing to an ancient, forbidden rhythm. I recalled the countless hours spent poring over esoteric texts in the dim light of my small office at the community college, hours committed to unearthing the legends of curses, arcane rituals, and the occult forces that many dismissed as superstition. Tonight, as I stood before this cursed masterpiece, those legends seemed to breathe into the very air around me. There was a weight to the atmosphere, a thick, palpable tension that suggested something was profoundly amiss. I wandered closer, letting the crowd's collective gasps and murmurs fade into a distant background hum. My eyes were fixed on every nuance of the painting, the frenetic brushstrokes that hinted at both agony and ecstasy, the almost imperceptible script etched into the darker portions, and the enigmatic interplay of light and shadow that gave the sense of another layer beneath the surface. Had the artist, in some fevered state, attempted to capture not just an image but a doorway to another realm? And if so, who was to say that the forces behind such a creation did not still linger in the ether, waiting for a chance to make themselves known? I stood there contemplating these thoughts when an unexpected sound shattered the hushed reverence. A piercing, anguished scream sliced through the air, halting the ongoing murmur of admiration. In an instant, the electric current of expectation transformed into a cacophony of alarm and disbelief. I jerked my head toward the source of the cry, my heart pounding as I observed a commotion near the far end of the room. There, nearly hidden by the throng of startled guests, lay a man crumpled on the polished floor. His face, still partially lit by the erratic dance of the gallery lights, was frozen in an expression of sheer terror. Blood stained his crisp white shirt, spreading slowly like an insidious bloom upon fabric. I rushed toward the incident, my steady academic curiosity now mingled with a mounting dread. The man lay sprawled next to a display stand that had previously showcased smaller, yet equally provocative works of art. His hand clutched a small, crumpled piece of paper, its edges peppered with dried blood. Squatting beside him, I could see that his eyes were open, wide with a look of abject horror, as if he had seen something that defied mortal understanding in his final moments. In that instant, the artistic splendor of the exhibition collided violently with the mechanics of a very real, very human tragedy. Elliot's voice soon rang out through the confusion, crisp and unyielding as he took charge of the situation. He ordered the gathered crowd to stand back, his tone brooking no opposition. His demeanor, though calm, carried an undercurrent of authority and barely concealed alarm. As he knelt next to the fallen man, I moved in close, compelled to observe every detail that might unravel the mystery of this ghastly occurrence. The victim's hand trembled as he clutched the blooded paper, and a sharp metallic scent mingled with the underlying aroma of turpentine and spilled wine. I carefully noted the peculiar shape of the handwriting on the paper, a spidery script that bore an eerie resemblance to the symbols etched into the lower corner of the painting. My mind raced with possibilities. Could this note have been part of the same dark narrative woven by the brushstrokes of the painted veil asterisk? The notion seemed absurd, yet in that moment, the line between art and reality blurred ominously. Around us, the crowd's initial shock gradually morphed into low, urgent whispers. Some guests pulled out phones to dial emergency services while others huddled in clusters, their faces contorted in disbelief. I observed a gallery attendant, her trembling fingers clutching at her scarf, as she muttered about an ominous chill that had suddenly descended on the room. The previously vibrant atmosphere had evaporated into something far more sinister, a palpable dread that seeped into every corner of the space. As I stood there, eyes locked on the grim tableau unfolding before me, I couldn't help but feel that destiny had conspired to bring me to this exact moment. I was no stranger to the macabre, having spent years immersed in the study of cursed relics and haunted legends. Yet nothing in my academic pursuits or prior encounters had prepared me for the visceral reality of witnessing a murder amid such an environment of art and beauty turned grotesque. I was struck by an overwhelming sense of both foreboding and, strangely, a ruthless curiosity, a need to understand the intertwining of horror and aesthetic that lay at the heart of this seemingly enchanted canvas. Eliot's observations were swift and precise. He frowned deeply as he examined the victim's trembling hand, then turned his attention to the note once more. "Miguel," he murmured, his voice low and laden with an urgency that belied our typically measured interactions, "this isn't just a senseless act of violence. Look at this mark, it's unmistakable." I leaned closer, scrutinizing the delicate, almost mystical curvature of the emblem that mirrored the strange motif in the corner of the painting. The symbol seemed to pulse subtly, as though it were alive with a hidden meaning that defied explanation. Our brief exchange was interrupted by the arrival of a uniformed officer, whose rigid manner suggested that he was already accustomed to chaos. He barked orders at the onlookers to keep their distance, securing the perimeter around the fallen man. Even as the officer's shouts filled the space with an air of frenzied authority, I could sense that every crackling whisper of the gallery was saturated with questions that no one yet dared to ask aloud. I took a slow, measured step back from the immediate scene, my eyes shifting between the painting and the now disturbed display where the body lay. The gallery, moments earlier a sanctuary of cultured appreciation, had been irreversibly tainted by this act of horror. The lights, once soft and alluring, now cast jagged, uncertain shadows across the walls. And in that chiaroscuro, I perceived an almost imperceptible change in the painting's appearance, a subtle, eerie shift in the interplay of dark tones that made it seem all the more sinister. The curator, whose hands had been trembling ever so slightly as he had orchestrated the evening's reveal, gathered his composure and began speaking in a frantic, halting manner. His words tumbled out in a desperate bid to restore order and perhaps to reclaim some semblance of dignity from the debacle. I listened with a detached academic interest as he speculated about pranks and ill-intentioned saboteurs, yet deep down I knew that the undercurrents of the evening whispered of secrets far darker than simple human malice. Unable to contain my own inner tumult, I drifted toward one of the quieter alcoves of the gallery, a secluded space where I could examine the evidence in relative solitude. Carefully, I retrieved my small leather-bound notebook from the inner pocket of my jacket, its pages prepped for jotting down every critical detail. I began to write, each word carrying the weight of my growing conviction that this murder was intertwined with something that transcended the mundane reality of criminal behavior. I sketched the shape of the cryptic emblem, noting its similarity to the brushstrokes that laced the painting's deepest recesses. The paper itself, now partially stained with the victim's blood, was annotated with looping, almost ancient characters that hinted at rites and legends I had once dismissed as mere folklore. I moved slowly, mindful of every sound, the rustle of fabric, the muted conversations, even the soft tap of a distant floorboard. Each noise seemed magnified, echoing like a drumbeat in the silence of my concentration. I was acutely aware of the interplay between my rational mind, honed by years of academic discipline, and the primal, almost animalistic fear that surged within me at the realization that I was witnessing a convergence of art, death, and curses. My pulse raced and my thoughts spun with images of dimly lit libraries stacked with forbidden tomes, cryptic incantations scribbled hurriedly in margins, and secret societies that purported to hold dominion over forces beyond the mortal realm. As I scribbled, Eliot moved in the background, his expression unreadable yet intense. He was speaking softly with the uniformed officer, his words measured as he started to recount details of the victim's final moments to an officer who seemed to be the bridge between order and chaos. I caught snippets of his dialogue. "The mark is deliberate. This isn't the work of a lunatic," each phrase fueling the dark curiosity that churned within me. I could feel that his seasoned experience was unlocking corners of this mystery that our untrained eyes might have missed. I admired his unflappable resolve in this storm of madness, for despite the shocking horror of the moment, his actions were deliberate and controlled, a beacon of empirical truth amid a sea of bewildering superstition. In the midst of this disjointed symphony of emotion and chaos, my gaze was drawn back to the painting. Even as the living world around me crumbled into a state of shock and confusion, the canvas returned to its silent, watchful vigil. The interplay of its shades now appeared almost mocking in its stillness, a testament to the artist's genius and horror alike. I could not shake the impression that the painting was communicating in a language that transcended ordinary speech, a language of symbols that whispered of ancient rites, of sacrifices made in blood, and the punitive hand of vengeance that awaited those who dared invoke its spirit. Nearby, a small cluster of distressed guests huddled in whispered conversation, their eyes darting nervously between the recovered body and the painting. I approached one of them, a middle-aged woman adorned in a tasteful dress whose trembling hands betrayed her composed exterior. In a quiet, halting tone, she confided that she had long heard unsettling rumors about the artist's work, whispers of occult engagements and secret rituals performed in the dead of night. Her voice was hushed but resolute, each word laced with the kind of dread that had long haunted the corridors of fringe academic lectures I had taught. I listened intently, my mind cataloguing every detail, every nuance of fear that seeped from her story. Her account mingled with fragments of conversation I had overheard elsewhere in the room, a mention of a hidden room behind the gallery where the artist was known to have hosted clandestine gatherings, an offhand reference to a ritual performed on a night much like this. The cumulative effect of these details was overwhelming. I could almost feel the brush of history's dark underbelly, the persistent tug of secrets that had never been meant for the light of ordinary life. Each whispered anecdote, each flicker of disbelief on the faces around me, further entrenched the notion that the painted veil was not just a work of art, but an enigma wrapped in a curse that stretched its sinister tendrils into the lives of those who dared to witness its power. As the gallery staff moved methodically to cordon off the area and secure the scene, I found myself drawn momentarily away from the immediate horror of the fallen man. I wandered to a quieter corner near a set of tall, narrow windows overlooking the city's bustling streets, a stark contrast to the chaos inside. There, the neon glow filtered into the room like shards of fractured light, casting distorted reflections upon the polished floor. In that quiet solitude, I took a deep breath, striving to steady my racing heart while my mind oscillated between the rational and the mystical. I could feel that something was wrought into this night that defied the banal explanations of human cruelty. In these reflective moments, I couldn't help but recall the extensive hours I had devoted to studying occult phenomena and the power of symbolism in art. I remembered dusty manuscripts that hinted at the possibility of cursed artifacts and forbidden rites, reminders that history was often written in the ink of tragedy and mystery. I thought of long-forgotten rituals that bound the spirit world to our own, rituals performed with an intensity born of desperation and retribution. And as I reflected on these memories, I glided back into the fray with renewed purpose, determined to record every detail with the precision of a historian and the insight of someone who had seen the darker side of human ambition. Rejoining Elliot, we examined every piece of evidence laid out before us with a shared intensity that transcended words. Elliot's steady hands moved over the victim's person, carefully noting every injury and its patterns, all while I meticulously transcribed the details of the blood-stained note. Each moment felt laden with duality, a strange coexistence of beauty and horror, like a well-composed symphony that had struck a discordant chord. The gallery, once a temple to ART's splendor, had transformed into a claustrophobic stage where fate was performing its most macabre act. Every whispered word, every gasping cry, and every glint of despair painted a portrait of chaos that paralleled the tortured imagery within the painted veil star. I found myself drawn to a particular nuance of the artwork that seemed to defy the static nature of paint. My eyes lingered on a small, nearly obscured emblem that the artist had rendered at the very edge of the canvas. It was a curious motif, an interlocking pattern that seemed to reverberate with an energy of its own. The symbol's form, etched in a shade of red that echoed the spilled blood on the note, compelled me to lean in ever closer, my breath catching as I endeavored to decipher its hidden significance. Though I could not yet place its meaning within the broader tapestry of the unfolding events, I sensed that its presence was deliberate, a silent beacon directing inquiry toward realms both ancient and forbidden. The murmurs in the gallery grew bittersweet with urgency as I returned to the scene. I trailed behind Elliot as he conferred with officers and witnesses, his questions precise and his gaze unwavering. I watched as he methodically questioned a jittery witness, a man with wide eyes and trembling hands, who recounted seeing a shadow flicker near the back of the hall moments before the scream. Each detail he extracted, every hesitant word uttered by those paralyzed with fear, fed into a growing narrative that was far more than a single act of violence. I could sense, as I scribbled down every fragment of conversation in my notebook, that we were peeling back layers of a mystery that had been carefully veiled beneath the guise of artistry. There was an almost sacred chaos to the scene, the clash of cultured discourse and primal terror, of refined aesthetics and raw, unbridled fear. I navigated through clusters of dismayed guests, each clutching their own lost illusions, as I silently recorded every gesture, every quiver of a lip, and every furtive glance. The night was unfolding in real time, a veritable tapestry of human emotion, threaded together by the sinister undertones emanating from the painting itself. In that moment, I could not help but feel that I had been thrust into a narrative that was written long before I had ever set foot in an art gallery, a narrative where every brushstroke was a harbinger of doom and every symbol a dire warning of the forces that lay beyond the mortal ken. As the minutes turned into an eternity, I found solace in the details that allowed me to understand the present without resorting to speculation about what might come next. The cool, contrasting shine of linoleum beneath my shoes, the whispered rustle of silk dresses as they brushed against one another, and the sound of Elliot's measured instructions formed a symphony of disciplined chaos that I documented with both curiosity and trepidation. I kept my gaze steady, my pen flying across the page in an almost feverish rhythm as I chronicled every twitch of a facial muscle, every subtle shift in the room's ambient light, and every trace of unease that seemed to envelope the once celebratory air. At one point, I stepped aside to offer comfort to a gallery attendant, a young man whose eyes brimmed with disbelief as he attempted to reconcile the visionary celebration he had come to expect with the night's unfolding nightmare. He confided in a halting tone that he had overheard rumors among the staff, whispers that the painted veil was cursed, that it had been born out of rituals not meant for mortal consumption. I listened intently, nodding slowly as I filed away this fragment among the myriad clues that would later form part of the tapestry of the investigation. His tremulous voice was a stark reminder that even among those who dealt daily with the ephemeral world of art, the potential for terror was never far from reality. By the time the gallery's official lights were dimmed once more, this time not by design but by the creeping onset of chaos, the shock of what had transpired had irreversibly altered the character of the space. The once lucid lines between art and life had blurred, leaving behind the raw, unpredictable aftermath of a tragedy that seemed to leap straight from the pages of an occult chronicle. I lingered near the display where the body had fallen, my breath shallow and my thoughts a spiral of questions without immediate answers. I wondered if, in some twisted manner, the events of this night were an inescapable echo of the artist's own clandestine pilgrimage into forbidden realms. In a final, lingering moment before the first responders could secure the area entirely, I allowed myself to be absorbed by one last glance at the painted veil star. The canvas stood unmoved by the mayhem, its dark colors now saturated with an almost foreboding clarity. I swear that for a fleeting heartbeat, the intricate design seemed to pulse with a silent scream, the desperate plea from the realm beyond the canvas. And in that inhale of time, I realized that I was now inextricably bound to this enigma, caught in the nexus of art and aberration as the harbinger of both tragedy and dark revelation. With a steady hand, I tucked my notebook back into my jacket, my mind brimming with observations and questions that demanded resolution. The night had taken a sinister turn, one that shattered the illusions of refinement and left behind the jagged remnants of a curse awakened. Eliot's voice, resolute and soft in its command, guided me away from the focal chaos and towards the deeper currents of the investigation. I followed him, every step taken with a mind perpetually oscillating between the certainty of evidence and the shadow of legends that I had long studied but never truly believed would come to life. The gallery, now a muted cacophony of hushed voices and hurried footsteps, bore the scars of the evening's violence, scattered fragments of shattered glass, pools of deep red on the polished floor, and a residual chill that seemed to seep from the very walls. I moved with measured determination, mentally cataloguing every detail for the record, for I knew that this night would not be forgotten in the annals of our intertwined destinies. In every whispered remark, every tear-streaked visage, and every hesitant glance cast toward the cursed painting, I sensed that the story was only beginning to reveal its ancient, dreadful truth. Standing at the threshold of a scene that would forever alter both my life and the legacy of Los Angeles art scene, I took one final, long look at the bewildered throng. The flickering neon outside served as a grim reminder that even in a city renowned for its dreams and decadence, nature's darker truths would indiscriminately shatter those dreams when least expected. And as I watched Eliot consolidate his silent authority over the crowd, I felt the gravity of the moment settle deep within me, a solemn premonition that I was about to be drawn into a mystery that spanned both the realms of reason and the uncharted territories of the occult. In that singular, unforgettable moment, I silently vowed that I would document every nuance of what I saw, every emotion that surged through the hearts of those present, and every subtle sign that might hint at the invisible hand of fate. The path ahead was as murky as the shadows beneath the grand arches of the gallery, and though my scholarly instincts urged me to seek clarity, a part of me trembled at the realization that some truths might be too dreadful to fully comprehend. With Eliot by my side, steadfast and inscrutable, I prepared to follow the trail of the cursed emblem and the sinister narrative it had inscribed on that fateful night. Thus began our journey into a realm where art was more than mere aesthetics, where every brushstroke resonated with the whispers of ancient rituals, and where the night was heavy with the promise of revelations too horrifying to be imagined. Every moment that followed was etched into my consciousness with the intensity of a nightmare, a vivid reminder that beneath the gleaming facade of beauty, darkness festered, waiting for its moment to emerge from the shadows. I pressed on, stepping away from the remnants of the chaos that had so abruptly invaded our celebration, and into the deeper mysteries that the night had laid before us. Every step, every fragment of memory, and every murmur of fear would serve as a testament to the enigma of the painted veil an enigma that had already begun to etch its curse into the very fabric of our lives. And so, with the relentless pulse of the city outside echoing in my ears, I advanced into the unfolding darkness, determined to capture every moment of horror and wonder with the unyielding scrutiny of a historian on the brink of uncovering a myth that was all too real. I stepped out into the cool Los Angeles night with a mind still reeling from the horrific events at the gallery. The humid tension that had wrapped around the exhibition hall now dissipated into the gentle evening air, yet an undercurrent of dread still thrummed in my veins. I paused on the sidewalk for a moment, allowing the neon glow of downtown to mingle with the soft murmurs of late-night traffic. My notebook, a constant companion through this unfolding nightmare, was clutched tightly in my hand. Every detail, every whispered clue, and every flicker of uncanny behavior was already pressing to be recorded. Elliot Brooks was waiting a few steps away on the street, his silhouette outlined by the shifting lights of a marquee. His gaze was intense, fixed on something in the distance as though he were already parsing the hidden language of the night. I quickened my pace to join him, and the cadence of our footsteps on the concrete formed a steady rhythm that was almost meditative in its constancy. There was little conversation then, the shock of what we'd witnessed had rendered words almost superfluous. Instead, our silence communicated volumes, an unspoken agreement that this was far more than a senseless act of violence. As we moved away from the gallery's imposing facade, I replayed the images of the night in my mind, the surreal horror of the victim's blood-soaked note, the inexplicable shimmer of the emblem mirroring markings on the cursed canvas, and the way in which the atmosphere throughout the gallery had shifted from refined elegance to raw panic. Elliot's face, usually so composed, bore subtle furrows of concern. I could sense that he saw beyond the gruesome spectacle, discerning patterns and undercurrents that no one else could perceive. Our first stop took us to a discreet, dimly lit doorway at the rear of the gallery, where the police had cordoned off the perimeter with nylon tape and harsh, flickering floodlights. I lingered at the edge, careful not to disturb the meticulous work of the forensic team. An officer in a crisp uniform directed a cluster of investigators as they carefully photographed each tangible clue: shattered glass, a spatter of blood here, an overturned easel there. Each fragment of evidence seemed to speak of an intricacy that went beyond a mere murder. It was as if every piece was deliberately arranged to hint at something deeper, something unspeakable. I knelt beside a table where a small relic had been recovered from within the ornate frame of the painted veil star. The object was curious in its form, a roughly chiseled stone pendant encrusted with what appeared to be obsidian fragments. Its surface was etched in delicate, looping inscriptions that glowed faintly under the investigator's portable lamp, inviting a closer inspection. My academic mind, steeped in dusty occult manuscripts and forgotten legends, immediately recognized the semblance of an ancient sigil. I traced my fingers over the cool, uneven surface of the pendant, feeling as if I were connecting with a history that belonged to another world. That familiarity, mingled with dread, sent a shiver down my spine. Elliot approached, his eyes narrowing as he regarded the relic. "This," he said quietly, "is no ordinary piece of art or evidence. It's a token, a remnant of a ritual perhaps." His voice, measured and intense, contrasted sharply with the chaotic energy that had defined the gallery moments before. I could see he was already connecting this artifact to the mystique of the painting, his mind racing through countless possibilities. We deliberated in near silence, the words passing between us laden with an urgency that transcended everyday language. A low murmur of voices came from the building as I and Elliot walked back to the gallery entrance. Inside, the atmosphere had palpably shifted. The once celebratory halls now were overcast by a somber pall of disbelief, punctuated by bursts of frantic conversation among the remaining guests. I could sense that each person present was grappling with the profound dislocation of having witnessed the collision of beauty and horror. It was as if the very soul of the exhibition had been tainted by a malevolent force, one that seeped silently through every brushstroke of the painting. Determined to leave no stone unturned, I headed toward a side corridor of the gallery that might still hold untold secrets. The corridor was narrow and lined with lesser-known works, sketches, preliminary studies, and personal mementos belonging to the artist. Though these pieces did not command the immediate attention of the public, they were rife with clues, hints in a hurried doodle, a smear of ink on a torn sketchbook page, the faintest trace of an inscription scrawled in a marginalia. I carefully rifled through a small collection of these materials, my mind alight with possibilities. One particular drawing caught my eye, a loosely rendered depiction of an obscure symbol that mirrored the paternoster-like shape found on the pendant. I paused, holding the drawing up in the forked light, and made a careful note in my ever-present journal. Just then, Elliot's measured footsteps announced his return. "Miguel, we need to talk," he said, his voice hushed as though the very air around us might carry our conversation to unwanted ears. We moved to a secluded alcove behind a heavy velvet curtain that separated a private lounge from the main gallery. Here, away from the scrutinizing eyes of other guests and officials, Elliot recounted whispered conversations he had overheard moments before. There were murmurs of a hidden room within the gallery, a place where the artist had convened with mysterious patrons under the veil of secrecy and ritual. These clandestine meetings, he suggested, might hold the key to understanding not only the cursed painting but also the odd sequence of murders that had now beset this night. I listened intently, my heart pounding in the silence as Elliot spoke in low, measured tones. He recounted details with the precision of a seasoned investigator, a half-heard conversation about the artist's previous encounters with eccentric collectors, a hushed mention by a gallery attendant of unexplained noises coming from behind a locked door, and a fleeting look of terror in the eyes of one guest as he passed by the painting. Each detail was a brushstroke in an emerging portrait of a conspiracy far more elaborate than mere human malice. It was an insidious tapestry woven with threads of occult symbolism, ancient rites, and the insatiable hunger for power that often lurks behind the world of art. After our brief exchange, I excused myself to return to my notebook and document everything with painstaking clarity. In the quiet solitude of a deserted corner, the scratch of my pen upon paper became a rhythmic counterpoint to the low hum of distant conversation. My mind was ablaze with thoughts of forbidden rituals and cursed talismans, and I could not help but draw parallels between the relic in my hand and the myriad symbols that had danced before my eyes earlier. I reread the notes from the victim's blood-smeared paper, comparing them with the inscriptions etched upon the pendant. The uncanny similarity was unmistakable, a common design woven through the fabric of the unfolding tragedy as if fate itself had marked this night with a damning signature. The hours slipped past with a surreal quality, as if time were both suspended and racing ahead. Meanwhile, behind the heavy glass windows of the gallery, the city's neon lights blurred into streaks of red and blue, reflecting the troubled inner world of those who had witnessed the evening's calamity. I wandered back and forth between the evidence and my recollections, each observation layering upon the last to create a mosaic of fear and fascination. There was a relentless urgency in my thoughts, a desire to penetrate the dense veil of secrets that shrouded the painting and the man who had created it. At one point, a familiar face emerged from the throng of investigators, a middle-aged gentleman with salt and pepper hair known in certain circles as Arthur Delgado, an art critic whose reputation for probing the occult undercurrents of avant-garde work was well established. Arthur's eyes, gleaming with a mixture of intellectual fervor and coded warning, fixed on the pendant as soon as he saw it in my hand. "That relic," he said, his voice husky from disuse and emotion, "is not merely an artifact. It is a remnant from a ritual long abandoned by time but resurrected by greed and despair." His words echoed in the quiet of our secluded space, and I felt a shiver of foreboding as if I were being pulled into a vortex of destiny. He spoke of the cursed lineage of symbols, of secret societies that had once worshipped forces beyond mortal comprehension, and of an ominous prophecy that foretold doom upon those who dare meddle with such powers. I challenged him gently, seeking clarity amidst the muddled narrative of esoteric lore. "Do you truly believe that a simple painting could be the medium for such dark forces?" I asked, my tone equal parts skepticism and desperate hope for rational explanation. Arthur's eyes narrowed slightly before he leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial murmur. "Art, when imbued with intention and layered with symbolism, transcends the boundaries of mundane existence." The artist in question was not merely painting canvases, he was capturing echoes of something ethereal, a portal, if you will, to the spectral realm that has haunted civilizations for millennia. As I absorbed his words, Elliot rejoined us, his expression grave and his gaze intent. "Arthur's insights are not without merit," he remarked, his tone deliberate as he surveyed the faces in the dimming light. "The symbols we've encountered tonight, on the painting, the relic, and even in the victim's note, all point to a ritualistic design. We need to trace the artist's origins and his circle of acquaintances. There are names, dates, and perhaps even secret markers that have been suppressed in the annals of art history." Eliot's words resonated with the hardened clarity of someone who had seen too many layers of human deception and clandestine operations to be taken in by mere surface explanations. Arthur shifted uncomfortably, glancing toward the locked door that supposedly led to the hidden room within the gallery. "I've heard that in his early days, the artist was drawn to obscure gatherings, ones that celebrated rituals of initiation, a merging of art and occult practices. There was talk of secret meetings held in rooms hidden from the public eye, where avant-garde ideas met ancient rites. I believe that room still exists somewhere, its location carefully guarded by those who revere its history." His voice trembled slightly as he spoke, a mix of excitement and dread hiding behind the scholarly facade. "We resolved to inspect every possible avenue of this labyrinthine investigation. Elliot suggested that we first re-interview a few key witnesses who had lingered around that mysterious door. With purposeful strides, we approached a security guard stationed near the entrance to one of the service corridors. His eyes darted nervously as he recognized our intent. I wasn't allowed near that door," he stammered. "They told me it wasn't part of tonight's event. It was always kept locked up, only a few were given access for special viewings." His hesitant words confirmed what we'd already suspected, that the gallery housed secrets intended for only a select few. I noted every nuance of his demeanor and every pause in his speech, silently committing them to memory. Our next stop took us to a modest, musty office tucked away at the back of the gallery. Here, Elliot persuaded a reluctant assistant to reveal a flurry of documents that detailed the artist's previous exhibitions, personal correspondence, and hints of financial entanglements with dubious figures. As I leafed through yellowed letters and hastily scribbled notes, I was struck by the recurring mention of the veil, not just in reference to the painting, but as a broader metaphor for the hidden layers of existence. The language was cryptic, filled with allusions to forbidden knowledge and ancestral curses. I could almost see the words twisting on the page, their meanings shifting like the spectral patterns on the canvas we had witnessed. A surge of questions flooded my mind. Who was the artist, truly, beyond the image of a troubled genius? What drove him to dabble in arts that bordered on the occult? And most perturbing of all, how had his work become the nexus for such a string of grisly events? I tucked the pages away carefully, promising myself that I would cross-reference these details with the library archives at my college once the immediate chaos had subsided. Time seemed to dissolve within the confines of that cramped office, the outside world reduced to faint sounds of passing cars and distant voices. As I sat there, pen in hand, the flicker of a solitary fluorescent lamp overhead cast shifting shadows on the documents, lending them an almost spectral quality. I felt as if I were peering into a window of some secret past, a past where art and the occult intermingled in a dance as old as time. Every letter was a link, a chain that, if followed diligently, might lead to the very heart of an ancient curse. After several hours of careful perusal, Elliot and I emerged from our temporary sanctuary, our minds laden with new insights and surfaces of inquiry. We agreed that our next step would be to make contact with individuals from the artist's closer circle, a group rumored to have been deeply invested in the occult aspects of his work. The city offered a labyrinth of locales where such individuals might be found. One name, in particular, resonated in the whispers we'd overheard: Isabella Marquez. Known in certain underground circles as a curator of arcane artifacts and a confidant of revolutionary artists, Isabella was said to possess an unparalleled understanding of symbolic imagery and forbidden rituals. Her fingers were said to have brushed decades of secret histories as she catalogued the esoteric lore of various mystic traditions. We traced her whereabouts to a modest apartment nestled in an unassuming building along a quiet street in West Hollywood. The building itself was a relic of a bygone era, its facade adorned with peeling paint and ivy that clung stubbornly to the stone walls. As we ascended the creaking wooden stairs, a feeling of quiet anticipation gripped me, a foreboding sense that every step was drawing us deeper into a realm where beauty and dread converged. When the door finally opened, we were greeted by an interior bathed in warm, amber light. Shelves lined with ancient tomes, obscure paintings, and esoteric artifacts filled every available space, and the very air seemed saturated with history and mystery. Isabella herself emerged from the shadows of the living room with an enigmatic smile and an air of quiet authority. Her eyes, sharp and infinitely knowing, took in our presence with a measured grace that belied the tumult of the outside world. "Detectives," she said, using the term loosely as she regarded Elliot and me, "I've been expecting you." Her voice carried a musical quality, each syllable imbued with an uncanny resonance that made it clear she was no stranger to the arcane. Without a moment's hesitation, she led us into a sitting area cluttered with manuscripts and relics that seemed to hum with latent energies. Our conversation with Isabella unfolded slowly, her measured tones painting a detailed picture of the artist's secret life. She recalled in hushed detail the artist's initial fascination with occult symbology, a passion ignited during his formative years in Europe, where he was exposed to esoteric traditions and clandestine societies. She spoke of cryptic symbols that recurred in his early sketches and canvases, symbols that had once been dismissed by mainstream critics as mere eccentricities, but which now resonated with the unmistakable aura of a curse. Isabella's recollections were interlaced with personal anecdotes, a recollection of the artist's fervent discussions about legacy, a dark prophecy hinted at in his private letters, and a ritual he had once performed in a secluded chapel on the outskirts of the city. Each account stirred a deeper, almost primal reaction within me, a mingling of scholarly fascination and visceral unease. As Isabella carefully unrolled one of several aged canvases, she pointed out a series of subtle details that mirrored the motifs found on the painted veil star. "Notice," she murmured, "the delicate interplay of light and shadow, the way this emblem is repeated like a refrain throughout his work. It is as though he was marking his journey, a journey that ended in darkness." Her words resonated in the small space, the gravity of her insights leaving little doubt that the painting was a central node in a much larger tapestry of hidden lore. I watched as she traced a finger along a roughly sketched symbol on the canvas, her eyes alight with the thrill of revelation. I was transfixed, feeling that each detail was a piece of a vast and unsolvable puzzle that teetered on the edge of forbidden knowledge. After a lengthy discussion that lasted well into the early hours of the morning, Elliot and I thanked Isabella for her invaluable insights and departed her apartment with a head full of competing theories. Once again, the city embraced us in its nocturnal embrace as we made our way back to the gallery, our thoughts a cacophony of evidence, arcane symbols, and the inescapable pull of destiny. The chill of the early morning air contrasted starkly with the oppressive heat of the gallery earlier, and I could feel the remnants of sleepless anxiety etched into the lines of my face. Every step was measured and deliberate, the urban landscape taking on an almost surreal quality in the pre-dawn gloom. We retraced our steps to the gallery, where a small team of investigators had begun sifting methodically through the remnants of the night's chaos. The building, now quiet except for the soft buzz of fluorescent lights and the occasional murmur of an officer dictating a report, was a somber reminder of the fragility of order in the face of unbridled darkness. I made my way through the empty hall as if it were a mausoleum, each shadow echoing the horrors of the past hours. I paused before the painted veil the cursed canvas that had sparked this avalanche of mystery, and allowed my eyes to drink in its unsettling beauty once more. The interplay of the deep reds and somber blacks was mesmerizing in a way that defied logic, a silent symphony of menace and allure that commanded both fear and reverence. I sat before the painting on a cold, hard bench in the quiet corner of the gallery. With a deep, steadying breath, I began to meticulously reproduce the intricate details of the emblem in my notebook, comparing it yet again to the ancient inscriptions I had seen in the library archives. Every stroke of my pen was an act of defiance against the unknown, a commitment to scrupulously document every observable anomaly, every spectral nuance that insisted on a supernatural origin. I found that as I sketched, my thoughts blurred wildly between the rational and the ethereal. The pendant, the relic, the disjointed whispers of terrified guests, all of it began to merge into a single, overwhelming impression of a force that lay just beneath the veneer of human civilization. Occasionally, I would hear Elliot's measured voice guiding his colleagues, his tone firm and resolute as he reassured a distraught officer or re-interviewed a hesitant witness. His presence was a calming anchor amid the tidal wave of chaotic energy that had overtaken the gallery. I admired his ability to maintain focus, a trait honed through years of unraveling mysteries that defied conventional logic. And though I was steeped in the lore of curses and the occult, it was Elliot's empirical, unflinching determination that lent confidence to our advance into this labyrinth of hidden meanings. I eventually rose from my contemplative state, my notebook now filled with hurried yet careful observations, and rejoined Elliot outside the now-dimmed gallery. The early light of dawn was beginning to break over the horizon, painting the sky in washes of lavender and peach that belied the grim events of the preceding hours. As we walked side by side along the quiet street, I recounted to him the key elements that had emerged from our investigations: Isabella's testimony, the cryptic documents from the gallery office, and those subtle yet insistent impressions left by the cursed artwork itself. Elliot listened intently, his eyes scanning the awakening city as if he were searching for further clues hidden in the interplay of light and shadow. "Miguel," he said in his trademark calm yet weighted tone, "we're dealing with something that touches on the ancient and the inexplicable. Every relic, every word, speaks of rituals that once bound man to forces beyond his understanding. It's not just a murder, it's a reenactment of an old, unspeakable rite." His voice, filled with a quiet intensity, resonated with both conviction and a tinge of uncertainty. I nodded in agreement, feeling that our paths were converging toward a truth that was as elusive as it was terrifying. Later that morning, as the city slowly stirred to life, I found myself in a tiny, cluttered research room at the community college where I taught. The room was a sanctum of dusty texts and silent secrets, and as I sat at my desk surrounded by stacks of aging manuscripts, I allowed my thoughts to wander freely between the pages of obscure occult treatises and the tangible horrors of the previous night. My pen danced across notes detailing the intricate lineage of symbols that reappeared on the cursed canvas, and I cross-referenced these with cryptic inscriptions found in centuries-old ritual manuals. Each discovery was accompanied by a feeling that I was peeling back layers of an ancient conspiracy, a tapestry of forbidden lore that stretched back to civilizations long crumbled to dust. The hours passed in a blur of fervent writing and furtive glances at the clock. Outside, the campus was quiet, the promise of spring lingering in the light, but the dark secrets of our modern world ever present in my research. I felt at once both a scholar and a reluctant participant in a narrative that had spiraled far beyond my initial academic curiosity. Every reference, every cross-check detail only deepened the mystery, reinforcing the notion that the artist had been guided, or perhaps possessed, by a force that defied human rationality. There was no easy explanation, no neatly wrapped conclusion that could exorcise the spectre of that cursed night. Instead, what remained was an unyielding puzzle whose pieces were scattered across history, art, and legend. My work was interrupted by a soft knock on the research room's door. Elliot appeared in the narrow doorway, his eyes reflecting the fatigue of sleepless nights yet alight with an unwavering determination. "I need you back at the station," he said simply. "There's been another development on the case." The words fell from his lips with an urgency that made my heart skip a beat. It was already too early for further revelations, and yet from the tension in his tone, I knew that our journey into the mysteries of the Painted Veil was far from over. I gathered my scattered notes and followed him out into the brisk morning air. The campus grounds were bathed in a muted glow as we navigated through a maze of corridors toward the administrative building. Outside, the city was slowly shedding its slumber, the low hum of waking traffic a constant reminder that life marched relentlessly onward. Elliot led me to a nondescript building where a team of investigators had set up a makeshift command center. Detailed sketches, photographs, and even hastily transcribed witness statements adorned every available surface. It was in this chaotic environment that the fragments of evidence from the gallery, relics, documents, and the recurring arcane symbols coalesced into a raw portrait of the macabre. Elliot introduced me to the lead forensic specialist, whose meticulous nature complemented his own relentless search for truth. The forensic expert, a quiet man with eyes as observant as a hawk's, meticulously recounted his findings. The pattern of injuries, he explained in a measured tone, suggests a deliberate, ritualistic precision. There's a symmetry to the wounds that one seldom sees in cases of random violence. I listened, my mind drawing parallels between the forensic details and the patterns I had documented in my research. Elliot's eyes met mine briefly, as if confirming that our separate lines of inquiry were converging on the same terrifying conclusion, that what we faced was more than human cruelty, it was an execution of an ancient rite. In the midst of this bustling command center, the remnants of the night's horror loomed large. I found myself retracing the evidence from the blood-stained note to the cryptic inscriptions on the relic. Each piece of data seemed interconnected, a deliberate design laid bare only to those who dared look closely enough. The lieutenant in charge then informed us of another curious detail. One of the eyewitnesses recalled hearing a low chant immediately before the murder, a sound that seemed almost otherworldly in its cadence. The admission sent a palpable shiver through the room. I could already feel that the cadence of that chant resonated with the verses I had read in obscure ritual texts, words that spoke of sacrifice, retribution, and the unyielding power of ancient deities. Between the clinical precision of the forensic reports and the fervent recollections of disoriented witnesses, we began to outline a disturbing picture, a meticulously orchestrated act that blended human passion with the trance-like fervor of long-forgotten rites. I jotted down every detail with a fervor that bordered on obsession. My pen etched lines that danced like the specters from that night, capturing the intangible dread that had seeped into our every step. Each note was a silent testament to the theories that were beginning to coalesce in my mind, a dark interplay of art, occult, and human ambition that seemed to mock the very notion of chance. As midday approached, I found a brief moment to step back outside. The light was harsh now, reflecting off the glass facades of nearby buildings and rendering the area almost clinical in its precision. Yet, despite the brightness, I could not shake the lingering shadow of that cursed canvas. I sat on a stone bench near the station, reviewing my notes and letting the steady rhythm of my thoughts merge with the sounds of a city unaware of its own hidden depths. I recalled Isabella's calm yet eerie declaration about the artist's dark inspirations and felt that each word was to be weighed carefully in the scales of my understanding. Elliot soon joined me on the bench, his face inscrutable as he contemplated the morning's discoveries. Without preamble, he shared his next directive: we need to interview one of the artist's old acquaintances, a man known only as Vincent. Apparently, he was once very close to him, and rumors say he holds secrets that may explain his descent into these occult practices. His tone was measured, hinting at both hope and resignation. I nodded, my inner resolve hardening in the face of yet another piece in this sprawling puzzle. We set off towards a part of the city known for its bohemian enclaves and storied past, a district where faded glamour met gritty reality. The journey was marked by long stretches of silent reflection as we navigated narrow, winding streets, their sidewalks littered with the remnants of a bygone era. Along the way, the urban tapestry unfurled before us, a mosaic of sun-bleached murals, aging storefronts, and the unmistakable whispers of history that resonated in every cracked pavement and weathered facade. I felt that the city itself bore witness to both beauty and decay, each step forward a reminder of the transitory nature of human endeavor. Our destination was a decaying apartment building tucked away on a side street, its exterior a patchwork of peeling paint and graffiti that hinted at secrets both trivial and profound. Inside, the corridors were dimly lit, the air heavy with the scent of mold and memory. At a weathered door with a faded number, Elliot rapped firmly. A moment later, the door creaked open to reveal a gaunt figure with hollow eyes and a voice that trembled as much with age as with regret. "I'm Vincent," the man said, his tone cautious yet oddly resigned. His eyes, darting between Elliot and me, betrayed a lifetime of unsaid sorrow. Over a stiff cup of tepid coffee in a cramped living room strewn with relics of a past both glamorous and tragic, Vincent recounted stories of his youth when the artist was a fervent believer in forces beyond mortal understanding. He spoke of late-night gatherings in smoke-filled rooms, of forbidden texts and clandestine ceremonies held in forgotten churches and abandoned warehouses. His words were disjointed, yet beneath the veneer of incoherence lay a clear message. The artist had once embarked on a journey into realms where human ambition met supernatural reckoning. Vincent's narrative was punctuated by long, heavy pauses, a reflective silence that seemed to acknowledge the enormity of the truths he was reluctantly sharing. He believed that art was a portal, a gateway, Vincent murmured, his fingers trembling as they caressed a faded photograph of two young men standing in front of a church shrouded in mist. He sought to capture that ephemeral, unworldly beauty on canvas, to bind it to his soul, for better or for worse. His eyes glistened with unshed tears as he added, "I fear he opened a door he never could close." Every word sank deeply within me, each phrase a spark that ignited both sorrow and fascination. I pored over Vincent's every inflection, every pause, as if these were the very keys to understanding the ancient curse that now enveloped us. Elliot pressed for more details, the names of secret societies, the exact locations of clandestine gatherings, hints of rituals that were performed under a blood-red sky. Vincent, though evasive at times, eventually yielded fragments that made my scholarly heart race, references to archaic chants, to mystical symbols etched under moonlit skies, and, most disquietingly, the mention of a ritual that had been performed in a dilapidated chapel on the outskirts of Los Angeles. After our interview with Vincent, we left his apartment with heavy hearts and minds laden with more questions than answers. Returning to the station, Elliot and I continued to correlate our new findings with the vast mosaic of documents and testimonies that we had painstakingly compiled over the last few hours. I carefully compared each alleged occult reference with the calligraphic inscriptions I had recorded from the relic, the painting, and the damaged note from the victim. The convergences were striking, each symbol, each reflective nuance, danced together in a macabre tapestry that transcended conventional explanation. In the ensuing hours, the station reverberated with quiet urgency. Elliot convened a brief meeting with several investigators, outlining a plan to cross-reference Vincent's testimonies with the historical records housed in various municipal archives and local libraries. I watched him lead the session with a commanding calm, his voice a steady beacon amidst the storm of conjecture and fear. I too contributed my insights, recalling passages from obscure texts and recalling late-night lectures on occult symbolism that seemed eerily relevant to the chain of events we were now deciphering with painstaking care. Late in the afternoon, with the sun dipping below the horizon and casting long shadows across the city, I found myself alone in one of the archival rooms at the local city library. The air was thick with the musk of aged paper and the quiet rustle of pages being turned by fellow truth-seekers. I sat at a modest wooden table, my notebook open before me, and began to sift through microfilm records and fragile documents dating back to a time when whispered legends were given clandestine credence. I was particularly drawn to an obscure reference in an 1880s manuscript that described a ritual known as the Unveiling. The description was labyrinthine, a mixture of allegorical verse and precise ceremonial detail that resonated with the symbols I had seen throughout our investigation that morning. As I transcribed the archaic language, my hand trembling slightly, I could feel the specter of centuries-old beliefs pressing in from all sides, demanding acknowledgement. The librarian, an elderly man with a soft, almost imperceptible smile and a quiet dignity, approached me as I struggled with the faint letters of the microfilm. "Find what you seek, Professor Vasquez?" he asked, his tone more gentle question than greeting. I returned his glance with a nod. "I hope so," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. Every word I read here makes it seem that this curse is woven deeply into the fabric of our history. His knowing smile deepened, as if he too had long harbored a secret understanding of the intertwining of legend and reality. I thanked him and continued my work, my focus absolute as the library's quiet sanctum enveloped me in both solace and a palpable reminder of the weight of human experience. Hours passed in a haze of meticulous note-taking and measured contemplation. With each scroll of the microfilm, a pattern emerged, a lineage of symbols and rituals passed down through generations, hidden beneath layers of cultural obfuscation and historical revisionism. The words of that ancient manuscript, with its references to a veil that shields the mortal from the ineffable and the unyielding gaze of a curse that binds the soul, filled me with both dread and renewed determination. I felt a kinship with those who had come before me as scholars, mystics, and even fools, who had dared confront the dark mysteries lurking behind the shadow of human ambition. When I finally emerged from the library well into the night, the sky overhead was a tapestry of stars, cold and indifferent to our mortal trials. I found Elliot waiting outside, his expression resolute yet tempered by the exhaustion of our pursuit. In the quiet that followed our reunion, it became clear that we had reached a temporary calm amidst the relentless storm of clues and revelations. The city around us, with its neon lights and soft hum of late-night traffic, seemed to whisper quietly of secrets yet unearthed, as if daring us to plunge deeper into the abyss of a mystery that refused to be contained. As we walked together along a deserted boulevard, the cool night air mingling with the residual heat of the day, I recounted everything I had learned at the library. I detailed the passages, the obscure references, and the uncanny parallels I had discerned between the ancient manuscript and the cursed elements we had encountered at the gallery. Elliot listened intently, his eyes never leaving the horizon, as if he sought to divine wisdom from the silent expanse. "We're on the edge of something monumental," he remarked softly. "Everything you uncovered here ties into the greater web of this curse. We're not merely chasing shadows, we're confronting the very fabric of an ancient rite." Our conversation continued under the quiet gaze of night, punctuated by intermittent echoes of distant traffic and the soft cadence of our own measured footsteps. We passed under flickering streetlights that cast elongated, trembling silhouettes, and each step we took seemed to draw us inexorably closer to a revelation that, despite all our efforts, remained tantalizingly out of reach. Amid this journey, I couldn't help but feel that every cobblestone, every whispered breeze, was imbued with the spirit of the past, a past where art, myth, and the unexplained merged into a seamless tapestry of human endeavor. By the time we reached our temporary safe house, a modest room above a quiet cafe in a forgotten corner of the city, we were both silent, lost in our own profound reflections. I retreated to a small table by the window and spread out my notes, photographs, and clippings like an array of sacred texts. Under the dim light of a solitary lamp, I reread Isabella's words, Vincent's recollections, and the cryptic verses from the ancient manuscript. Each piece of evidence was a thread in a sprawling tapestry lined with ominous portents and whispered legends, and I felt the weight of their cumulative significance as I prepared to delve ever deeper into the ominous layers of the curse. In that intimate solitude, I allowed my thoughts to wander freely. I considered the possibility that the cursed canvas was not merely the work of an artist who had dabbled in taboo subjects, but rather a deliberate invocation, an act intended as both a summoning and a warning. The minutiae of the night still echoed in my mind, the cold touch of the relic, the static intensity of the emblem, the murmur of incantations uttered in hidden chambers long forsaken by time. I scribbled down theories and connections, determined to capture every nuance before the relentless march of time would blur these crucial details. The hours stretched on, marked by the rhythmic tapping of rain that had begun to patter softly against the window. The storm's distant rumble and the scent of wet asphalt lent a melancholic air to my solitary vigil. I continued to pore over my research, interweaving the newfound clues with the foundational knowledge of occult lore that had steered me into this dark labyrinth. Every line in my notebook was a testament to our shared pursuit of truth, a slow, deliberate revelation that was simultaneously terrifying and exhilarating. Eventually, the storm outside subsided, leaving in its wake an eerie silence punctuated only by the occasional drip of water from a leaky roof. In the hush of the pre-dawn, I allowed myself a moment of respite, feeling the weight of the curse settle upon my soul like a shroud. There, in the dim lamplight, the disparate threads of the investigation swirled in my mind, unfurling into a pattern that hinted at deeper cosmic intricacies. I knew that if we were to break the grip of this ancient design, every detail needed to be scrutinized meticulously, a task that balanced on the knife's edge between scholarly inquiry and a descent into forbidden madness. Roused by a sudden urgency, I gathered my notes and, with the first light of day peeking over the horizon, rejoined Elliot. The resolve in his eyes had not dimmed, if anything, it had sharpened into an unyielding necessity. Together, we stepped back into the waking city, ready to confront the evidence that continued to multiply with every passing hour. Our journey tonight had taken us from the blood-stained chaos of the gallery to the quiet despair of historical records and the intimate confessions of those who had once walked in the artist's shadow. As the sun rose in a burst of pastel light over Los Angeles, we returned to our investigation with a shared understanding. Each clue, every whispered legend, was a cipher, an invitation to unlock a mystery that had long been sealed by the weight of ancient curses and human ambition. The cursed canvas was not just an artifact of a disturbed mind, it was a deliberate talisman imbued with the power to transmute art into a prophecy of doom. I walked beside Elliot with a heart heavy yet determined, every step a pledge to follow the evidence no matter how deep or dangerous the path might become. The morning light did little to dispel the darkness that had taken root in our investigation, for the truth we sought was interwoven with mysteries as old as time. In that quiet, unyielding resolve, I knew that the journey into the heart of the curse had only just begun. Thus, in the early hours of that dawning day, as the city slowly waked to a new reality, Elliot and I braced ourselves to confront the culmination of our desperate search for answers. Every whispered memory, every fragment of lost lore was now a beacon guiding us toward a revelation that promised both great peril and the possibility of untangling the curse that had ensnared so many lives. With our notebooks filled with hours of painstaking research and our minds alert to every nuance of shadow and light, we embarked on the next phase of our grim investigation, undaunted by the weight of a legacy that threatened to engulf us, yet resolute in our determination to uncover the truth hidden within the cursed emblem of *, the painted veil star. And so, with the quiet pulse of the city as our background score, the mystery pressed onward, its dark tendrils reaching out to touch every aspect of our lives. Each moment, though fraught with uncertainty, became a stepping stone into the abyss of secrets long buried, a journey that promised to unravel layers of deceit and ritual, transforming every fragment of darkness into a part of a larger, benign understanding. Yet deep within, I could feel that the curse was far from broken. It lingered on, insidiously woven into the very fabric of our quest for truth, urging us ever onward. In that charged dawn, with my heart full of both dread and determination, I vowed to relentlessly pursue the clues and symbols that had marked our path. The relic in my hand, the countless esoteric texts, the whispered secrets of acquaintances like Vincent and Isabella, and the spectral echoes of that fateful night, all were pieces of a puzzle that would eventually force us to confront an ancient malediction. I could only hope that, as we peeled back each layer of this intricate tapestry, we would reveal a revelation so profound that it might finally bring closure to the dark, cursed legacy of the Painted Veil Star. With the city awash in the uncertain light of morning and the echoes of the night still reverberating in my memory, I stepped forward into the day's unfolding mystery. The path was long and fraught with danger, but every detail I had observed was a promise, an invitation to delve even deeper into the enigma that had now defined not only our investigation but the very notion of fate intertwined with art. And so, accompanied by Eliot's steady determination and guided by the relentless call of forbidden knowledge, I advanced, ready to face whatever revelations the day had in store. The city had barely awakened when Eliot and I, armed with our notebooks and a tapestry of clues, set out to follow the final lead. The charge in the air was palpable, a mixture of fear, determination, and a reluctant hope that even the heaviest curse could one day be undone. The pale light of dawn had barely chased away the cloak of night when we found ourselves standing before an abandoned warehouse near the old docks, a forgotten relic of industrial ambition now repurposed into a secret sanctuary of occults. Its broken windows and rusted metal doors whispered of long-buried secrets, a perfect stage for an old ritual awaiting its final act. Eliot's eyes, always as sharp as a hawk's, scanned the facade with a guarded intensity as we approached. I could feel my pulse quicken with every reluctant step, a prisoner of both dread and the magnetic allure of forbidden knowledge. We slipped inside through a gaping side door, the chill of neglect and salt air mingling in a musty breath. In the dim corridors, shadows stretched like accusing fingers, and the only light came from occasional slits or from the eerie glow of our flashlights. Every step we took deepened the sense that we were entering territories that had long been kept secret, a pathway traced by hands both human and something else entirely. The interior of the warehouse was cavernous. Along one wall, a series of crude symbols painted in faded red led us to a hidden stairway descending into subterranean depths. As we followed the trail, the air grew colder, heavier, as if laden with a centuries-old weight. The damp stone walls echoed with our quiet footsteps, and somewhere in the distance, the sound of a low, monotonous chant began to pulse, a chant that tugged at some primal corner of my memory. I clutched my notebook tightly as Eliot motioned for silence, his hand a firm command against the darkness. At the base of the stairs, we entered a vast, secret chamber. Flickering candles in ornate holders cast long, quivering shadows across the room. In the center of the space, arranged with a perverse precision, stood an altar laden with relics, scrolls in strange, winding scripts, a book bound in cracked leather and unknown symbols, and, most arresting of all, a glass case cradling an object that immediately made my blood run cold, a painting, unmistakably the Painted Veil Star. Its canvas, set behind years of protective glass, pulsed imperceptibly, as if alive, and the shifting imagery seemed to ripple like water disturbed by a hidden hand. Around the altar, hooded figures knelt in silence, their voices rising and falling in inscrutable cadence. For a moment, time itself appeared to hesitate. Every nerve in my body screamed in protest as I realized that the very heart of the curse was being reawakened right here. Elliot's eyes narrowed, his posture turned predatory and deliberate. "This is it," he murmured, his voice barely above the sound of the chant. "They're about to complete the ritual." I watched, heart pounding, as one of the robed figures, an individual whose pairing was both noble and unnerving, stepped forward and began to intone words in a guttural tongue. Each syllable resonated through the chamber, stirring the dormant energies that had long lain in wait. I could see the manifestation of ancient symbols flickering on the walls, a spectral tapestry woven by the interplay of candlelight and something otherworldly. My hand trembled as I reached for my pen, determined to capture every detail for the record, even as a deeper part of me recoiled from that which was unfolding. Elliot's presence was a steadying force. In a swift, silent gesture, he signaled that he would make his move. With the determination of a seasoned investigator who had faced horrors before, he advanced toward the altar. I crept along behind him, careful to remain unseen by the gathered cultists. Every breath felt like a fragile secret, every heartbeat a countdown to an irrevocable collision of destiny and dark design. Suddenly, as if sensing our intrusion, the chanting faltered. A hush fell over the room, a pregnant pause filled with the promise of doom. The robed leader's eyes, partially obscured beneath a conical hood, snapped toward us with a look of astonished fury. "You dare?" his voice boomed, reverberating off the stone walls. In that moment, the delicate balance of the ritual shattered into chaos. Elliot sprang into action. With a series of fluid, calculated movements honed by years of unforeseen peril, he intercepted the startled cultists. In an almost balletic display of skill, he disarmed one assailant, his actions a deadly dance between precision and instinct. The chamber erupted into a flurry of muffled shouts and the clash of bodies. I was a silent witness to this final confrontation, every moment recorded in my memory and scrawled feverishly into my journal. Amid the melee, the robed leader retreated to the far end of the chamber, clutching an ancient tome that seemed to exude a tangible malevolence. I exchanged a glance with Elliot, an unspoken understanding that we must intercept this final vestige of the curse before it could be unleashed. My legs propelled me forward as I pursued the retreating figure, weaving through fallen candles and scattered relics that told silent stories of a dark legacy. The echo of my footsteps blended with the frenzied din around me, each sound a clarion call towards a destiny that I had no choice but to confront. In a narrow corridor lit only by sputtering light, I finally caught up with the robed leader. He turned, desperation mingling with defiance, and raised the ancient tome as a shield, as though the weight of its cursed knowledge could protect him. "You cannot stop what has begun," he hissed, his eyes glinting with fanatic zeal. "The curse will bind us all, for truth, for justice, for the power of the forbidden." Before I could reply, Elliot emerged from the shadows with a steely determination that left no room for parley. "Enough," he declared, his voice slicing through the tension like a razor. With a rapid and precise series of strikes, he disarmed the leader, sending the ancient tome crashing to the cold, hard floor. The impact reverberated through the corridor, and for an interminable second, time itself seemed to hold its breath. I scrambled forward, my hand reaching to snatch up the fallen tome. The cover was worn and cracked, its indecipherable script beckoning with a sinister promise. I could feel the weight of history and malediction in that object, a tangible distillation of the curse that had ensnared so many lives. Elliot, his eyes never leaving mine, said quietly, "We end it now." His tone brooked no debate. There would be no further sacrifice to this unholy ritual. In that charged moment, with the robed cultists scattered and the sanctity of the hideout hanging in the balance, I made a decision. Drawing upon the ancient texts I had studied for years, texts that had once seemed like mere academic curiosities, I began to recite the counterchant I had painstakingly transcribed during our investigations. My voice, though trembling at first, grew stronger as I channeled every ounce of conviction and desperate hope. The words, archaic and resonant, filled the corridor with a sound that vibrated against the stone walls. I could see Elliot pause, a flicker of recognition in his eyes, as if he too recalled legends of a counter-ritual designed to seal away dark forces. The robed figures, caught between uncertainty and the rapidly unraveling nature of their ceremony, began to waver. Their chants faltered, and the air seemed to tremble with the clash between the ancient invocation and the newfound resistance. The ancient tome lay on the ground, its pages fluttering wildly as if caught in a spectral wind. I continued my recitation, each syllable an act of defiance against the oppressive darkness. The opposition of magically charged energies was palpable, a tangible force that pressed in on us from all sides like a living shroud. Elliot advanced once more, securing the perimeter and ensuring that any remaining conspirators were immobilized by a mixture of martial prowess and the unexpected force that our combined efforts had conjured. I could see the raw determination etched on his face, every muscle taut with the single-minded focus of a man who sought to restore balance to a world awash in chaos. The soft glow of candles now seemed to flicker in rhythm with the cadence of my words, and the very walls of the chamber reverberated with a strange, humming resonance. In a final, breathtaking moment, the counter-ritual reached its zenith. The ancient tome, as if acknowledging the reversal of its dark purpose, began to crack and shudder. A sound like 1,000 whispered secrets filled the air as its cursed power was neutralized. The emblem on the altar, once pulsing with a malevolent light, dimmed to a final, pitiful glow. One by one, the robed figures collapsed, their chants fading into silence, their dark energy diffusing like smoke dispersing into the morning air. I sank to my knees, my heart pounding so fiercely I feared it would shatter my ribs. The oppressive atmosphere that had clung to the chamber for what felt like an eternity was finally lifting, replaced by an overwhelming sense of release, a trembling serenity born of hard-won victory. Elliot approached slowly, his expression unreadable, but in his eyes I saw a glimmer of the relentless hope that had driven us both through this harrowing ordeal. "It's over," he said softly, the words a benediction that seemed to dissolve the lingering vestiges of the curse. I looked around at the ruined remnants of the ritual, the scattered pages of the tome, the flickering candles now reduced to melted stubs, and, most haunting of all, the painted veil its image still suspended behind the glass case. There was a strange beauty even in its decay, a final, mournful exhale of a torment that had spilled over into our world. With deliberate care, Elliot and I approached the case. I could feel that, in that moment, the painting had borne witness to centuries of secret suffering and malevolent genius. Yet there was also a promise of redemption, a final stroke that would vanquish the darkness and restore a fragile balance between art and life. Gingerly, Elliot lifted the glass case. The protective barrier was shattered, its fragments glittering like shards of a broken curse. I reached out and, with trembling hands, pulled the painting from its confinement. The canvas, still vibrant with its dark, shifting hues, seemed to pulse softly in my grasp. I could almost sense the latent energies within it subsiding, like a storm passing its peak and gradually easing into an ominous calm. The robed figures were now either unconscious or in the reluctant grip of our arresting officers, and the chamber had become a silent mausoleum to secrets that would no longer be allowed to fester. Elliot leaned in, his voice low and resolute as he uttered, "This ends now." With that, he carefully secured the painting and the now inert relics, ensuring that the instrument of the curse would never again hold sway over the unsuspecting world. Outside the warehouse, the early afternoon sun had ascended fully into a sky of azure clarity. The contrast between the bright day and the night's grim endeavors was startling. I stood on the steps of the building, watching as the arrested cult members were led away in silence, their voices hushed and broken by the dawn of retribution. A quiet calm had descended upon the scene, a profound stillness that spoke of battles fought and darkness repelled. In that moment, I felt the full weight of what we had confronted, of a curse that had reached deep into human ambition and ancient ritual, only to be undone by the unyielding determination of two unlikely allies. The journey had been fraught with peril, each step an immersion into both the beauty and terror of unseen worlds. Yet here, in the clarity of a new day, there was redemption. The cursed relics were now in safe custody, the ritual broken, and the sinister legacy of the painted veil was finally laid to rest. Elliot and I exchanged a look that conveyed more than words ever could, a silent assurance that while the scars of this night would forever linger in our memories, justice had, at last, been served. I felt a surge of bittersweet relief, tempered by the realization that even as the curse was exorcised, the mysteries of the past would always echo behind every shadow of art and ambition. Together, we made our way back through the city streets, the sun warming our backs as the memories of that cursed night began to soften under the gentle caress of daylight. I took out my notebook and scribbled the final lines of today's account, a record of our triumph, a measured verse to conclude this chapter of darkness. In each word, I sought to capture not only the horror we had faced but also the quiet, resolute hope that had carried us through to this best of endings. As I walked beside Elliot, I felt the city breathe a lighter air, as if an ancient burden had lifted. The spectre of the curse had been vanquished, its accursed influence disintegrated by our unwavering resolve and the timeless wisdom of rituals turned against their own power. I knew in my heart that this victory, though hard-wrought, would stand as testament to the possibility that even ancient darkness could be overcome by the light of truth and human spirit. In the glow of that bright day, with the echoes of our footsteps mingling with the soft hum of a city reborn, I felt a profound gratitude for the chance to witness, and indeed, to take part in, a moment where myth clashed with reality and was ultimately conquered. The journey had not been without its cost, and the memories of horror would forever remain etched in my soul, but the ending was one of renewal, a final brushstroke that had rewritten the narrative of a cursed legend into one of hard-fought redemption. I clutched the painting close for a moment, as if in silent farewell to the anguish it had borne witness to. Then, turning my gaze toward the horizon where the city met the endless sky, I stepped forward with the quiet conviction that we had not only exposed a dark conspiracy, but that by doing so, we had restored a piece of humanity's battered spirit. And with that, I carried our collective hope into the radiant afternoon, knowing that even the darkest curses could be undone by steadfast hearts and a determination to reveal the truth. The finality of our actions was not marked by celebratory fanfare but by an inner, enduring satisfaction, a tacit promise that the battle between light and shadow would continue. Yet, on that day, the scales had tipped in favor of the brave. As I lowered my pen and closed my journal, the city around me sang a quiet hymn of life renewed, a best ending forged in the crucible of terror, tempered by wisdom, and sealed with the final, victorious brushstroke of redemption. Thank you for listening to The Curse of the Painted Veil. I hope you felt the pulse of suspense and the echoes of hidden secrets as vividly as I did. If this tale captivated you, please consider hitting that like button, sharing the story with fellow mystery lovers, and subscribing to Bookbound Audio so you never miss another adventure. Stay tuned for our next story, where more chilling mysteries and spellbinding narratives await. Until next time, keep your curiosity alive and your love for stories ever bound. Happy listening!